Hello, and welcome to the Impartial Skeptic. And that's me. I am the Impartial Skeptic. Why am I impartial? Well, I'm agnostic. For one thing, I don't discount the possibility of God. I see the argument kind of the same, goes back and forth with people. The atheists will say, well, where did God come from? And then the theists will say, how did nothing come from nothing? Well, you guys are saying the same thing. That's what's kind of funny about it is like either something came from nothing or something didn't come from nothing. I don't know how else to describe it. Either there was a God who came from nothing and was just always here, or there was a universe that came from nothing that was always here, or that they popped into existence at some point. These are questions that we can't answer, not with science and not with religion. Religion's a matter of faith. I've made the argument that oftentimes atheism, I think, is a matter of faith as well, because you have to assume that what happened beyond what we already know. How could you know what happened? How could you that's a matter of faith to say that, well, the universe came from the Big Bang and this little singularity that was just somehow there. We don't know how it got there. So we can't say for sure. So that's why I consider myself not an atheist but an agnostic. Plus I am actually a huge fan of Jesus and his teachings. I'm not always that big a fan of Christianity and Christians, though. Um, which is not to say that some of them aren't really good. I mean, the ones who actually follow, I mean, and I know Christians like that. They actually do their best to follow Jesus's teachings, and that makes sense to me. Um, but unfortunately, in Protestantism, it's not really about deeds. It's about you accept Jesus into your heart, and that's that done. Which doesn't really make sense, and it doesn't really follow everything in the Bible. It definitely doesn't follow Jesus's teachings, which is, I mean, what it does is it follows Paul's teachings. Paul is something I'm going to be talking about in my first actual video. I've already done an introductory video. I did one almost a year ago, I think, when I first started this. I started this because I was trying to make money for a farm, but I wasn't able to. I didn't really have the time to do it, so I ended up doing a different channel, something a little bit different, and then really wasn't able to do that. And now I kind of things are kind of different in my life. I have more time, so now I'm back able to do this kind of stuff again. And so what happened with me was, I see, I grew up Catholic, and I was never very religious. I did all the Stations of the Cross and did the Rosary and all the things I was supposed to do, and I went through the motions. I never knew what any of it meant, to be honest with you. Not much. I didn't really care. Honestly, I just didn't care. I used to um, get up late. And then when I was able to drive and stuff, I'd get up late and say, "Well, I'm going to go to the 11 o'clock mass," when everybody else went to the early. And then I would just take my mom's car and I would go do something rather than go to mass because I didn't like it. I didn't like to go. It was just not my cup of tea. But anyway, so as I was growing up, I was very interested in history, and there's always a crap load of stuff going on in the Middle East, just like there is right now. Um, with Israel and some of the surrounding players. So it was always a relevant piece of history. So I would always go back, and I did. I studied the history of Israel and the early Israelites, Hebrews, and then decided at one point that, well, I know that the Bible does have some historical stuff in it, and I know it's not going to be super accurate necessarily because they're telling a story, and it's kind of they're telling their story, So we're always partial to our own stories, um, and which being impartial, as the impartial skeptic, I want to get to the bottom of some of that stuff. So anyway, I start reading the Bible, and I found the Old Testament very interesting. I found it very disturbing as well, um, but. Um, but the history part of it was interesting, and you could sort of match some of it with history, some of it you couldn't. Um, some of it maybe made up. Some people believe. I think that I don't necessarily think that it is. I think that they might not have gotten all the history exactly correct, but it's still it tells a good story. So anyway, I actually enjoyed it, reading the Old Testament, and then when I got to the New Testament, I read Mark, or I read Matthew first, of course, and then I read Mark, and then I realized one of the things I realized immediately was that, okay, Mark was probably written first. That was one of the very first impressions I got reading the New Testament, was that Mark was written first, because it was seemed like more of an outline. So I knew that it was before Matthew, and then I saw that Matthew and Luke were actually fairly similar, and so then I realized that well, they were sometime later, and they have some similarities in them. And there's a lot of stuff. See, Mark is very it just kind of tells the story. It doesn't go into a lot of stuff. There's stuff that's added to the end to make it look different. But then, like with the resurrection and stuff, they added that later, because we know in older Marks it doesn't have that. I forget what verse it is, 20 something, I think. I don't know. I'm not going to even say, because I don't remember. I have my Bibles and stuff here. Here's my favorite Bible, though, by the way. So I have this, custom one with my name all in it and everything. But here's my favorite Bible, actually. I mean, I'm digressing, I know. And that is the New Oxford Annotated Bible. And this has the Bible, of course. And then it has, stuff about um, interpretation and things like that. It goes beyond. It's the historian's Bible. That's what it is. So anyway, so it's a very useful tool. So I'm reading. So then I get to John, of course, and John is way different than the others, and I could I'm starting to piece together how a religion was formed. This is my dog. How religion was formed around. This is my producer. This is Roisin. Okay, she's very affectionate. I love you, baby. Come on, let's get down. Um, how how they progressed through these books, these gospels, how the story progressed, and that's why I'm sure that Mark was first, um, because Matthew and Luke, they add stuff to the story of Mark, and then John just goes into pure religion and almost kind of poetic and stuff like that. And having later on read the Gnostic Gospels, and then going back and reading John again, I was like, oh my God, John is like the first Gnostic Gospel. I think it's one of the early uh, in the Gnostic movement. I think it's because it's very similar in some ways. It's not as outlandish as some of them, because it gets pretty outlandish, but it's kind of like that. It has that kind of mystical, sing-songy type of, I don't know. It's hard to describe. So anyway, so I- then I was like, I could see this whole thing um, spill out. I couldn't tell where Matthew and Luke came into play, and as it turns out, they're probably right around the same time. So that kind of tracks with what my thinking along those lines. So then I get to Paul, and I start reading Paul's letters, and it was just kind of like, oh my God, what? This is completely different. And then going back to Acts, and you could see some of the stories that Paul tells in Acts, and he was in this dispute with Peter and Jesus's brother James. Of course, I grew up believing that Jesus never had any siblings, and that because that's what the Catholic Church teaches, that Mary and Joseph are celibate for life, which is just absolutely absurd. In fact, Joseph probably dies because he was probably older. The story about the virgin birth is a little bit sketch too. There's some evidence that she might have been pregnant outside of the wedding, and but it's there's not enough to really nail it down. Some of the folks go into it, but anyway. So I don't want to get too much into that. So anyway, so what happened with me was I'm reading these things and I'm going, I wonder if anybody else has noticed this stuff. And I'm like, surely somebody else has noticed. I mean, I'm no genius. Okay, maybe no, I'm not. I'm no genius. So I'm like, somebody's noticed this. And so then I start, doing Google searches and stuff like that. Pretty soon I'm finding like James Tabor and Bart Ehrman and a number of other people, and start reading their books, and it's like, oh yeah, these are things I noticed. And so I actually made me feel really good that I noticed things that these scholars hadn't noticed. I have a had a good friend. Um, Unfortunately, it's hard to argue with a Christian because they just get upset. And I tried to discuss some of these things with them, and I wanted to. I've tried to discuss them with pastors before. I've gone to Bible study and tried to discuss these things in Bible study, but you know what happens? You get kicked out. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of weird. So anyway, so then I start reading these books and finding and finding that I was correct in thinking these things. And I'm gonna change windows here. There we go. So then I start reading the Bible more, and I've read it through several times, and I start looking for things, and because see, here's the thing. Here's the proper way to read the Bible. Don't read the Bible. Don't go to a church and Bible study and read the Bible with them, because they're going to tell you what to think. Read the Bible on your own. Read it with an open mind, and read it from not from a perspective of you're trying to prove that religion is necessarily true. Read it from an open minded perspective, and it reads a lot differently. And look up. This is what's good about this. It tells you what really the orders of things are. See, I used to actually be a Christian for a while, but because I started going to Protestant church and stuff, I was mainly I just had. Yeah, you have stuff in your life, and you go in for a community. And I was married to somebody that was going to a church, and uh, yeah, it was. I mean, they said some of the weirdest things in the church. It was just like I would sit there and just go, "Oh my god," and watch all the people going, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and I'm like, "No," it's like, what are you talking about? That's just ridiculous. But and then also I have a study Bible that I bought during this time period, and this thing is thick, and the letters are it's really small, but it has all the instruction what everything means down here. Oh God, I read it, then I read the what the a lot of times what it says down there, and I'm like, how do they get that? It's like I'm getting something completely different. What the heck? So this is what people study off of in church is like a study Bible, and it tells you what to think. That's what happens with a pastor. Pastor goes to seminary or whatever pastoral school or whatever they do, and they learn a certain thing. And different denominations will teach different things. Obviously, if you go to seminary, Catholic seminary, you're going to learn some stuff that's completely different than you're going to learn in Protestant. I think both have things that are wrong, and I think both have things that are right, Protestant and Catholic, based on my reading and stuff. But yeah, it's interesting. And then I also belong to the Biblical Archaeological Society, or get the Biblical Archaeological Review and stuff like that, and it's a really good source too. And so we're finding things. I also have read the Dead Sea Scrolls, and um, what I find is interesting is you'll talk to a pastor, and it's like my buddy used to say this. He says, he goes, we've found ancient texts like the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff, and he says, they've found that from all the texts that they found that the Bible has been perfectly translated all the way down the line. And I'm just sitting there stunned because I know differently. And it's like, no, I don't. Who's teaching you this? And then he gets all over me. He's like, well, what kind of what kind of scholarship do you have? He goes. I talk to people that study this stuff, and it's like, me too. Bart Ehrman, I don't talk to him, but I read his books, and he's sent me books. This friend of mine has sent me books on from pastors and stuff, and I read it, and it's just the same old stuff, and it doesn't prove anything, and it doesn't. It doesn't change my mind in any way. But they won't ever read the other stuff. I but I had to tell them it's like, yes, I do have scholars because Bart Ehrman and James Tabor, these are these are heads of religious departments at college at universities. These aren't some pastor who wrote a from Eureka who wrote a book. These are real. Um, yeah, I guess you're a scholar if you go to a biblical scholar if you go to a seminary or to pastoral school or whatever the hell they call it in Protestantism. But it doesn't necessarily. You're learning it a certain way. You're not studying it. You're studying what you're studying the religion is what you're doing. But it's um, it's different when you read it differently. It's when you read it with an open mind on your own, you get different things out of it, and that's what happened with me. And I'm actually a pretty solid reader when it comes to noticing things. I'm a careful reader. I'm a plotter. I read fairly slowly because I like to have a lot of good understanding of things. So I'll go back and reread things and then look things up along the way. But anyway, my first video after this one is going to be, which will actually end up being my third, is going to be on Corinthians and something that I believe was added to the text. And I will explain that forthcoming. Anyway, welcome to the program. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it ends up being good.